coming through when the growth look good on you. Best believe they wanna screw now. I've been trying to climb, devil threw me in the dark. Baby, don't be insecure, you can still go make a mark like blow. Could never let them drain my soul now. Blow. Table turning like doorknobs, wow. Blow. I think I'm about to set sail. I'm a walking, living legend, walking with my chest out. Life keep dealing me cards, I keep fitting in love.
Yes, people, we are back in the building. You know what time it is. You know what it is. It's G, and we are here today. And today, as you guys can see in the title of the video, we're here to talk about Liverpool young midfielder Stefan Bajcetic. Now, I might not even be pronouncing that correctly. I don't know. I'll let you guys kind of decide that. Stefan Iniesta is a few of the is a different name that some people like to give him, kind of thing. Obviously, his ties to Spain. He's also Serbian as well, is also eligible to play for Serbia. But before we even dive into that, before we even get into it, as you can see, obviously, as always, scroll across the bottom. Please smash that subscribe button, smash that like button. We are on the road to 300 subscribers at the time of this video. So please make sure you're smashing that subscribe button. So let's get into it, man. Stefan Bajcetic, young player, 18 years of age, made his debut for Liverpool this season in our 9-0 win against Bournemouth in the Premier League. Easy game to kind of come into, good game as well early in the season. The problems, hadn't really set in for Liverpool, so to speak. Liverpool was still at the beginning of the season. It wasn't obviously seen as a problem. We were kind of, fresh. We were still trying to do our thing. A lot of things were kind of not happening a little bit, behind the scenes and stuff like that. But no one was really worried. We're now in February, just come off a 2-0 victory over Everton, and I think that now he's had time. Bajcetic, now he's had that time to kind of bed himself into the squad, bed himself into the team and things like that. Players have gotten used to him a little bit. He's gotten used to the players. He's gotten used to, kind of the way that Jurgen Klopp wants his teams to play, how he wants him to play, specifically. I think we can give like a better judgment. He was originally signed from Celta Vigo. There was talk that he was going to go to Manchester United. I know that they were in for him at the same time as us, but we were able to get that deal over the line. Obviously joined our academy. I think it was back in 2020. Wasn't really in there that long. I think he had only played like a season or two in the Liverpool youth setup. And then obviously, as I said, this season he has made his debut. Now, we'll take a look here. Main position, centre back. He has played. He was there as a centre back. Would I say, at Celta Vigo, at the end, and then a little bit at the beginning of his time at Liverpool. And then I think they saw his qualities on the ball. They saw what type of a player he was. They saw that maybe they can utilize his skills best in the defensive midfield position, central midfield as well. He can obviously play, and I think, again, as I like to do, with a few of my like player watchers and stuff like that, this is a guy who's got quite a bit of a good skill set. He's got a lot to his game. His repertoire is quite big in regards to what he can and can't do and stuff like that. So, decent player, man. I like Bajcetic. Bajcetic. I'm gonna call him Bajcetic. I like him. I think he's a good enough prospect. I think he's probably gonna be, if things keep panning out the way that they have been, I think he's probably the next one up in terms of players. I mean, he didn't come through our youth academy, so there is that. But young players to come through, the Liverpool kind of setup, so to speak. Players who have played in the under 21s, 23s, whatever you want to call it, under 18s and stuff like that. He's like the next one to come through. Obviously, the last one I would realistically say would probably be Curtis Jones, to be honest with you. Obviously, we've got other players who are out on loan and things like that. Tyler Morton, Leighton Clarkson. They're players who we'll know more about them next season as to what Jurgen Klopp wants to do with them. Trent Alexander-Arnold, obviously, way before that. And we haven't really had anybody else, in between. And I think what we see with Bajcetic is that, he's a player who, this was probably the best season for him anyway to be able to break through. So I think things always time themselves pretty well. And as they say, it's all about the timing. It's all about the timing. This was going to be the season. If he was going to break through, this would probably be his perfect time to do so. Obviously, still, you'd prefer to come into a team that's doing a lot better than Liverpool are currently, but ultimately they're not. So, which has allowed him the time to kind of come in, be a different kind of body, a different voice, a different everything. Something that you're not going to be used to, because we haven't had a Bajcetic in the middle of the team before, and especially playing quite a pivotal-ish role, especially in the last few games since the World Cup, especially. And I think that him coming in this season, I think it was good for him. It's a good learning curve as well, especially because he's so young. This gives him something else to kind of think about in regards to when the team's doing bad. Understanding that kind of, you're at a massive football club, one of the biggest in the world. They're coming into a team that's playing really woeful this season. Performing below expectations. Considerably below expectations, and this teaches you to have that kind of mental kind of strength to be able to, do what you do. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Literally, it's just to kind of do what you do. What are you good at? Are you able to showcase those skills? Can you really, can you do what you do when the going gets tough? We need to see that as well, because it's not always going to be, plain sailing at any football club. Doesn't matter where you are. You look at the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas, they've had their issues in the past as well. Barcelona probably just coming out of their kind of issues that they've had, post Messi and stuff like that. So, it's all about understanding, hence why you will see, and I'm not trying to compare him on that level because I don't think he's there, obviously, but when you look at like a Pedri, a Gavi, and Ansu Fati, when you look at those kind of players, they were able to shine, through the bad times at Barcelona, and now they're reaping those rewards first and foremost, but they've become ingrained within the new culture that is being set over there at Barcelona with Xavi. And I think, obviously, we haven't got a new manager yet, but with Bajcetic, he's going into that. I'm changing his name, but Bajcetic, he's going into that kind of new era of, the supposed Liverpool 2.0. What the team is going to look like in the next few years. Is he going to become a mainstay? And and all these kind of various different things. And I think it's going to be an interesting summer. Before we dive into stats and all these kind of different things, I think it's going to be an interesting summer, especially for his own development. But I won't be surprised if we see him go out on loan to another team just to get consistent football, a bit like a Tyler Morton, even though Morton wasn't really playing, but he was in and around the first team and stuff like that. He's gone over to Blackburn. Probably mixed reviews with him over there. But at the same time, he's still the main thing is being able to play that men's football consistently, and I think that might be something potentially. I don't know. I'm not advocating for it, but it might be something Jurgen Klopp may potentially think about. In the summer, especially if reports are to be believed. With Liverpool looking at new central midfielders and things like that. It's funny because you look at it and you see someone like a Jude Bellingham. He's only 19. Look at the level that he's at, and you look at a Bajcetic. You look at the level that he's at. Obviously, there's a considerable gap between the two players, but they're only a year and probably a few months off in age, kind of thing. One's at the higher end of their development, the other one still kind of getting through. And I think that's why I don't really look at the age thing too much. When it does come to a player, if you're good enough, you're good enough. The age is kind of irrelevant because, as I said, Bellingham's 19, is a year older than someone like a Bajcetic, but look at the level that he is at this current age. But look at his development stages. Birmingham played a lot of football there. Then he's obviously gone over to Dortmund. He's playing a lot of football there, and then his next stage is, hopefully going to be Liverpool. But he's then got that next stage, in him. But he's been able to play football from such a young age at a decent level, and then he's just gone on and on and on. Is that something that Bajcetic is going to need to do to be able to develop his game and stuff like that? Who knows? I guess that's where Jurgen Klopp comes in, and the staff, the team kind of come in and see just where we're at as a team, as a club. And as I said, it's going to be vitally important as to where Liverpool are trying to go, how they can go about that. As I said, in the summer, if we sign some new midfielders, if Liverpool go out and sign, 3 midfielders, automatically that's Bajcetic out of the team. If he's then out of the team, that means he's not getting enough game time. Is he going to get enough game time, throughout the season? We know that Klopp is not really a good rotator. He's only someone who rotates when there's injuries, but when it's just everything's plain sailing, he doesn't really rotate his team that much. So squad players get unused quite a lot in, this Jurgen Klopp team. Last season, I'd probably say it was an exception. And even then, to be honest with you, we weren't really rotating. It was only in the cup games. Premier League, which is your bread and butter, the one that you play the most amount of games in, 38 games. You're not really rotating much. You're kind of keeping the same teams out of it. Now, on one side, there's something to be said about that, keeping a stable, settled team. Everyone knows their place, blah, blah, blah. But then at the same time, I guess as Jurgen Klopp knows, you're going to have to then try and balance that with squad players and things like that, who some want to play, some need to play, some feel they should be playing more, and all these kind of, various different things. All the players are at different stages of their career. Not everyone's on the same stage. So, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act. But at the end of the day, that's what Jurgen Klopp gets paid the big bucks for. I expect you to go out there and be able to handle that, to be honest with you. And if anyone doesn't want to be a part of the team, they know where the door is. Don't really care, who you are. But when we're talking about Bajcetic, as I said, very good player. I like to kind of look at him. I think he's more of a deep line playmaker. I think he can be a deep line playmaker. Yeah, we've seen him, come in and do the tackling and stuff like that. We look at his map and stuff like this, again, operates mostly. It's funny, he's supposed to be the defensive midfielder. But when we look at his positioning, most of his positioning is actually on that right central midfield area, which I find quite funny, actually. When you look at that, that's where most of the heat map is actually coming to, right central midfield, obviously the left side, and obviously DM. But I guess that's just where he picks up the ball, where most of his game is going to be played and things like that. But I did find that very, very interesting. Now, this is only for the Premier League, in terms of totality. All the games that he's played in the Premier League, these are the positions that he actually takes up. And like I said, I did find that very, very interesting to see, why he takes up these positions first and foremost. But then subsequently, is it a case of he is the defensive midfielder, but giving him probably a bit more of a free roam, when we do, especially, against teams that we should be beating. He got that bit more of a license to kind of go off and, as I said, just showcase, his kind of skill set. We take a look here. This is obviously the positions that he's played, both Celta Vigo and for Liverpool youth sides, and obviously the first team. So we've got centre back, obviously defensive midfield. He's also played a game at right back, and obviously, as I said, central midfield. So yeah, this is a guy who I kind of expect that. I always find with guys who can play centre back and defensive mid, for some weird reason, I always feel they can slot back in at right back. I don't know why. It's just one of them things. Like, I look at Henderson and I think if he wasn't at this kind of level in terms of, I know he can't last games, I would like, maybe you put him at right back at some stage, or just try him there. Or if we needed someone at right back, I would look at Henderson as an option if there was no other. Obviously, no Trent, no Gomez, no Milner. So, like a fourth choice right back. Yeah, I always feel like central players seem to be always, especially when they're right-footed, mostly when they're right-footed, seem to be able to slot into that right back position. I don't know why. It might just be one of them kind of things, or a coincidence kind of thing. But yeah, man, Bajcetic, I like him. Like I said, man, I like him quite a lot. And there's 3 games now. Obviously, he's played a few games this season anyway. And as I said, made his debut against Bournemouth. And there was 3 games that I kind of looked at. One was obviously the game that we had lost the other night against Everton. But also when we played against Manchester City, that also told me something, a little bit of something as well. And the game against Wolves, where we won 1-0 thanks to Harvey Elliott in the FA Cup before we got knocked out, unfortunately, by Brighton. So taking a look here, this is the game against Wolves. So we start off with that one. This is the midfield that we had against Wolves. So we won 1-0. So he was playing alongside Thiago and Keita. And we came up against their midfield, which was Traore on the right, Aït-Nouri on the left-hand side, Moutinho down the middle. So in like a 3-pronged attack behind, Raul Jimenez. And I think when they came up against that, again, in that kind of game, when we look at his stats here, if you guys can see it, passes into the final third, 2 accurate long balls, he didn't make any, dispossessed once, 3 out of 3 tackles, 1, interceptions 2, recoveries 5, and ground duels 5 out of 6. And I think that's what he does have, in my opinion, in his locker. I felt like in that kind of game, again, that was the first time I think Jurgen Klopp had ever used that midfield trio of Keita, Bajcetic, and Thiago. And when we watched that, I think a lot of us, we saw that kind of game and we thought to ourselves, okay, cool. New midfield, first and foremost. So obviously they've got to be able to gel together, but maybe he's just trying to put the components of these guys have enough legs, more leg than a Hendo, a Fabinho, in the middle of the park, and they will be able to do the job that's kind of required. I think in that game, what I saw the most from what I can remember of that game was a couple of weeks back, but what I can remember most of that game, which is the reason why I felt, if we check here again by the ratings, the reason why I felt that the team played reasonably well, when we look at it, Carvalho, decent score, Thiago, 8.3, Bajcetic, 7.4, and even Keita, 6.9, and obviously Elliott's man of the match. I think the attack was really, really important in this game. I don't even think that they were that good in terms of what they were doing. I don't feel like we were, again, we just seem to be a team who are not really carving people open, left, right, and centre. But for the job that was kind of required, if you looked at that front three straight off the rip, even the front six, actually, to be honest with you, all of them are players who like to play with the ball. And I think that was something different for Wolves to obviously come up against, especially as well, because they obviously know they're so used to coming up against a Liverpool, quite industrious, harass you, press, and all these kind of, various different things. But Carvalho, Gakpo, and Elliott, what you've got is young players who are energetic, who are energized. And what they were able to do was they were able to play the short game, play the passing game, but also because they're so young and they've got the energy to do it, they can do that press. When they do that press, doesn't matter who's in there, it doesn't matter what attack you've actually got. As long as the attack is doing that press, the midfield have an easier game. And I felt like in that game, I didn't look at Bajcetic and think, he was out of place or anything like that. And again, I've questioned, Bajcetic being in the squad a good few times, and I feel the reason why I've questioned him being in the squad so much is just purely not because I don't think he's good. I do. I think not that I think he's on this level of like a Foden, but I almost want it to be like a Foden development whereby you come into the team it kind of gradually. Obviously, the situation is totally different. City winning all the time. I think when Foden did make his debut season, City were going on to win the league that year. So it makes it a lot more easier for you to kind of come in, play with, your Bernardo Silva, your Kevin De Bruyne, at the time, Sterling, Jesus. This is before Haaland obviously come in, and it's just easy, man. Life is so simple. Like you just come in to these ballers, and it's just all you need to do is just keep it simple, showcase what you can do, of course, but keep it simple, play it nice, and the team will help you in that kind of case because they're playing with absolute brilliant and fantastic players. Unfortunately, Bajcetic isn't playing with that. He's playing, this season especially, he's not playing with fantastic players. He's playing with players out of form. He's playing with players who are too old. He's playing with players who are declining. He's playing with players who, just can't do what the manager's asking him to do. So when I was thinking about his development, which is all I actually care about, because I want him to stay here at Liverpool long term, because I do think he'd be a good player. I just looked at him and thought, I don't really want to I don't want to be deep to him and just throw him into the lion's den. People always say, yes, we have to chuck them in at the deep end to be able to know if they can swim. But then if they drown, was it their fault? I always think that in my mind. It's like you throw a child into the deep end of the swimming pool and then you're looking at them thinking, oh, you can't swim. When the reality is you needed to be able to get them up to that. You needed to start them in, the kind of easier end of things. And then they can keep showcasing, and every single week that they keep going to the swimming lessons, they keep going further and further and further and further until you can just throw them into the deep end. They don't panic and things are okay. But obviously, as I said, context is key, because obviously the situation is he's just been thrown in the deep end. Liverpool are out here absolutely drowning and they're almost looking for a lifeguard to come in and save. And this is a guy who hasn't really learned fully how to swim yet. But hey, guess what? He's watched a couple YouTube videos. He's been to a couple lessons. So we're just going to try and see, hey, look, just try and remember everything you've learned. Throw them in there. If you keep doing it over and over time, in that kind of panic situation, maybe you'll just learn a lot quicker. And I feel like that's what his development has kind of been like. And when we watch that game, as I said here, against Wolves, it was everything kind of connected together. The attack allowed the midfield to be able to play their game. So the midfield didn't have that crazy gap that we've seen throughout the entire season. The midfield were close enough to the attack because you had a lot of front three, especially with Elliott and Carvalho, they were coming deep quite a lot to get the ball, which obviously left Cody Gakpo isolated in that kind of one-man role, which again, hence why his score so low. So, and that's not really a role I feel he can do well, but it allowed for the midfield to be able to connect a lot better with the attack. Hence the reason why I felt, the attack did pretty well. If we look here, we'll go to the Everton game that we had the other evening. Obviously, he's playing in the midfield. This time, he's playing with the two oldies in Fab and Hendo, up against a five-man midfield. Now, before the game, prior to the game, we all thought that physicality is going to be so key. Will he be able to withstand that kind of level of physicality? And I think we can say that, he was able to. Everton didn't pose the same physicality as I thought they would, like they did against Arsenal, but he was able to showcase himself in and amongst everything. These are his stats, obviously, from the game in itself. Tackles 1, only won 1 out of the 2, clearances 1, interceptions 2, recoveries 5, dribble pass 5 times, which is obviously a little bit of a concern. Ground duels 1, 4 only out of 11, aerial duels 1, 2 out of 2, and was fouled once. Again, when I look at those stats, I do look at it and think, little bit. Do you know what I mean? It is a little bit shaky in regards to that. If we're just looking at the numbers wise defensively, then you're looking at it thinking, okay, that might potentially cause an issue. But when we do look at sorry, that was the City game. When we do look at those kind of stats, again, that's something that he's going to need to improve upon. That's going to be something that he's going to obviously definitely need to work on. As I said, 4 out of 11. Aerial duels pretty good. Find that funny how he's able to win 2 out of 2 aerial duels, because he doesn't seem like the tallest guy in the world. The recovery is really, really good. He was dribble pass, as I said, 5 times. So again, that's something that he's got, and he's going to need to work on defensively in games, especially when you're coming up against certain midfields. As I said, you're coming up against McNeil, Onana, Idrissa Gueye, and Decore and Iwobi, players who they are going to try and run beyond the lines at times when they can, even though the ball was obviously they were trying to get the ball up to Sims up top, and then he was supposed to be the target man and then bring everybody else into play. But that's where I need Bajcetic to have that positional kind of awareness. And I felt like overall his performance was pretty good. I didn't really have a problem with his performance as an overall, but there are obviously little bits and bobs that he just might need to just kind of sort out, because that was against a really poor Everton side who played quite poorly, in my personal opinion. And when we see the next one come up, we'll see, there's levels to this. And again, he's only 18 years of age. So, of course, this is going to come with time, give him a bit more time to be able to understand, and also understand, the tactics that are being implemented and things like that. But, as I said, as an overall, he didn't let the occasion get to him. I assumed that he was going to get like a booking, because he's been picking up bookings quite frequently in the last couple of games. And I thought, this might be another one. This is why I was a bit worried about him potentially starting the game. But again, kept his cool, kept it simple, nice passes. Saw him do quite a few crossfield passes, long balls and stuff like that. He was able to kind of connect. So I said, you know what? Hey, he proved me wrong that he was ready for that game anyway, and I think we got Newcastle coming up next. Yeah, Liverpool got Newcastle coming up next away. Going to be a tough game, because you're going to come up against a team who are going to be very compact, a team who are not going to give you time and space on the ball. They're not going to allow you to do the fancy stuff. They're not going to allow you to try and break their lines. And defensively, I believe Newcastle are the best defensive team in the league. It might have changed, but if not, they're in the top 3 at the bare minimum in the Premier League. So this is not an easy team to break down. Not many teams have done so. We scraped a win against them up at Anfield, their only defeat this season in the Premier League. So that tells you the kind of tough ask that the midfield are going to have against a team, like Newcastle. We look at the City game. Now, this was the game that I watched. This was just obviously straight after the World Cup. Everyone's just coming back, so there is that. Coming up, in the midfield 3 with Elliott and Thiago. Coming up against Kevin De Bruyne, Rodri, Gundogan, Mahrez, Haaland, Palmer. That midfield 3. That I've seen that midfield 3 come up against quite a few teams. So there isn't no shade on that. There really isn't no shade on that. I don't expect you, because you're not at that level, in my personal opinion. Maybe if it was a Bellingham, I would be a bit more. I'd be a bit more worried, so to speak. But when you're coming up against that kind of midfield three, again, I don't expect you to shine. If you do, it's a miracle, and we will look at you a lot more differently. But same way, you've got to face these teams. Are you ready? At the end of the day, the manager's giving that trust, in you. Are you ready for these type of games? And again, when we look at that kind of game, accurate long balls, no tackles, one dribble pass twice, 1 out of 3 ground duels, 14 touches, passes into the final third, 1. Again, not the greatest, so to speak, in terms of numbers wise. And again, I only throw the numbers and stats kind of thing just to kind of give you an overall picture, because again, we can do the eye test all day long, and the eye test will give you a great indication as to what you're seeing on a football pitch, but stats will always give you a clearer picture, in my personal opinion, because they always allow you to see things that you just don't always see in a game. You're not always going to understand, myself included, you're not always going to understand certain little things that may or may not happen in matches, hence the reason why stats are obviously always there as a measure. And we know how Liverpool work via data with their transfers and things like that. We know that that's a key component of how we do our recruitment. So when I'm looking at these stats and stuff like that, I'm just trying to understand, how he measures up in these kind of games. Look, his rating was 5.8 in the game. He played atrociously poor. So the whole midfield, in my personal opinion, did. Man City, in my opinion, in that game, were able to bypass that midfield very, very easily. But again, I'm not going to give full blame on the midfield, and this isn't just the target Bajcetic. It's to pinpoint everything, but his role within that. And when you looked at the front three of that day, Carvalho, I believe he got hooked off, I think at halftime. I can't remember. I don't think he lasted the full game. Yep, he did. And Darwin Núñez and obviously Salah played okay in that game. Could have done a lot better, for themselves. But then they could have done better in the defensive transitions in helping out the midfield. Because again, when you've got midfield who, Elliot is getting 5.7, Bajcet's getting 5.8. Bajcetic didn't even last the full game. He got himself a yellow card. All of these kind of different things. That was like a baptism of fire. That was really throwing him in at the deep end. And you're throwing him at the deep end against what I would consider to be the best team in the Premier League. Not this season, but in a general sense, in the last 5-6 years, or the last decade, to be honest, the best team in the Premier League has been Manchester City. So, when you're throwing in an 18-year-old kid and you're telling him, yeah, I need you to go up against these guys, I need to see how you do and blah, 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 just do what you do and, you should be okay. I didn't feel like it was ever going to end well, unfortunately, for him. And I picked those 3 games because I felt you had a game like Everton, which was a different type of game in terms of Merseyside derby. Both teams are absolutely shit this season. Form-wise, both teams are crap, even though Everton have obviously come off that win against Arsenal, but both teams needed the victory, needed that morale kind of boosting win. So there was a lot of intensity that kind of went into it. And the sheer fact that it's a Merseyside derby, there's just intensity. We saw how the game went. We saw some of the tackles. We saw, some of the little things, Robbo, that happened, within the game. And I felt like that might just be a little bit too much for him. I thought that Everton were going to come at Liverpool the same way they came at Arsenal, as I said previously, and they just didn't. They just, whether they weren't able to or whatever it was, they just weren't. They just couldn't do that, and he was able to showcase his skills within that type of game. And then you got a different type of game against a Wolves, a team that another team you're expected to beat, but having that comfortability in that kind of midfield. And it was a new midfield 3 that we had never tried before, and it was the midfield 3 that obviously Klopp wanted to try and move forward with. Since then, obviously, up until Thiago's injury. And I think all 3 of them are able to complement each other pretty well. All 3, Keita and Bajcetic have got the energy. Thiago provides the guile. And I think he provides the guile in the team, and Bajcetic provides the calmness within that kind of midfield. And he's not really overwrought. And where he's a new commodity in the team, I also think that teams maybe don't really know what to necessarily do with him in that team. Do they press? If they press, he's good enough to get himself out of it. He can pick out a pass, so sometimes it can maybe confuse teams when new players obviously just, come in, and he is almost like a new signing, Liverpool's favorite phrase. And then obviously Keita, who is a bit of a presser. He likes to press. He likes to be the first one of that 3 who will trigger. Sometimes even when we were in our heyday and we had, the Mane, Salahs and Firmino, Keita will be the one pressing, the centre back or the goalkeeper, which allowed the 3 behind him, Mane, Salah and Firmino, to then be able to pick up their positions, which then works well. And then obviously we looked at the Manchester City game, because I said I just wanted to show the difference. Like there are levels to this, of course. Yeah, and it goes into my next point, and having a conversation with one of my buddies, and I said to him, and he said the same thing to me, which is next season, like we said, it's going to be very interesting to see what Liverpool do. We've got a raft of midfielders, some who are going, some who are staying, some who need to play, some who might need to go out on loan, all these various different things. I don't really know where Bajcetic fits into that. I guess it will depend on maybe what happens with Fabinho. Also, then, most importantly, is going to determine this factor is whether Liverpool are going to buy, or have they got the money to buy firstly, but if they do, are they going to buy enough midfielders that we probably need? As fans, we're asking for 3 midfielders, but then as fans, we also want to see Bajcetic play, but I'm hoping and thinking that we do believe that he's maybe not at that level. I don't think he's at that Liverpool level, say, of a few seasons ago, of anything like that, where we were performing at a world-class elite level, but he potentially will get there. But we need players who can come in now. I don't mind having these youngsters dotted about if they can get a bit of games. I prefer, to be fair, youngsters going out on loan, keeping your squad kind of players there, fair enough. But ultimately, it just depends on what's going to happen there. Because as I said, we saw what happened against Manchester City. Saw the same thing with Harvey Elliott last season at the San Siro. I felt like it was men against boys in that kind of game. He got overruled by that situation. I feel, it was a very poor game. But again, you throw man in at the deep end. You're going to one of the biggest, best, most world-renowned stadiums in the world in the San Siro. Of course, man, I've seen many a guy go there and completely just crumble. And unfortunately, that's kind of what happened with Elliott in that game. And with Manchester City, maybe not world-renowned, but, in terms of the team is very world-renowned, or Europe anyway. And the players there that you're coming up against is going to be a problem. And it just, I guess Klopp wants to see where you're at with your own development. And maybe that was a little bit of a test for him as well, to be able to understand that. So, different kind of games, different roles in terms of what he has to do in each game. Ultimately, next season, let's wait and see. Obviously, we've still got this season to worry about anyway. So, of course, for the next few games, I want to see him in there. I don't want him to continuously keep playing because he will get injured. Him being 18, that doesn't stop you from getting injured, especially the way that Liverpool play, a style that's not sustainable, not conducive. It's going to bring up injuries. We've seen with Thiago, people say, but he played 10 games. Ultimately, he didn't need to play all 10 games. We've had a lot of FA Cup games, or 3 FA Cup games in that time. Did he need to play all of them? No. Could he have had a rest? Yes. Did Klopp give him that rest? No. What's happened now? He's injured, and we need to just be careful with what we do with our young players in terms of trying to bed them in. When we can bed them in. And if the situation permits it, then do that. If it doesn't, you don't need to force it, kind of thing. And with any player really, but with our young players, especially the ones that we know and really, really want to kind of break through. Ben Doak's injured now. Don't know what's going on at Liverpool. To be honest with you, the whole medical department, the whole training infrastructure needs to completely change. It has to change from next season. It cannot continue this way, because the reality is the only way then the team can be successful is we'd have to have a Chelsea kind of window and spend 600 million just to get enough players through the door, just so that we have enough so that when players are injured, you don't really notice it. And then your 3rd, 4th, 5th choice team is still a good enough team to go out there and perform, because at the moment we don't have that. We're scraping players together. Jota came on against Everton. He's just come back from an injury, a long layoff. Is he ready? I saw him kind of slip in his first few moments. I was like, "Ooh, Jota, you might just need to slow down." I don't want that to happen to someone like a Bajcetic. He's still young, in his development, but a very good player, a very, very good player. I think he's a Spain under-19 international as well. He got the low socks on, so, he got big shoes to kind of fill, when you do things like that. But I think he's got the guile. I think he's got the swagger to be able to show everybody that, he is a very, very good player. He is a player who will eventually make his way into the Liverpool squad. Is now the right time? Only time will kind of tell. Only time will tell. But guys, let me know in the comments, what do you think of Bajcetic? What do you think of him as a player? Where do you kind of see his future moving forward? Should he be a mainstay in the team next season? Should we have him at the base of our midfield? Would you prefer to see a different midfielder in there with Bajcetic as an option? Or would you prefer Bajcetic to go out on loan? Let me know what you guys obviously think in the comment section down below. As I said, we are on the road to 300. I'm hoping by the time that this video is posted out, we have obviously gotten past that 300 mark. But if not, guys, please make sure you smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. I'm G, and I'm out.